Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this very special episode just before Diwali of 2021. Um, we are really excited to have Monica Hallan with us for this Right Circle. And I think, considering the kind of expert she is, a very apt session to do just before our main Lakshmi Pujan festival, which we all look forward to every year. And this year is looking much better because we seem to be out of the woods as far as COVID is concerned. Um, Monica is a very accomplished and acclaimed personal finance writer, speaker, author. She's been handling and helping money management decisions for families, for corporate affairs. She's also been an adjunct, she is an adjunct professor at the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, Ministry of Corporate Affairs think tank, and also was chosen as a Yale World Fellow in 2011. But apart from that, she also writes as a journalist for many mainstream publications. She's run TV series that have been very successful. I think I can just go on and on about her accomplishments, but I will leave it to Weatherhy, who is the moderator for our session, to unveil more and more of Monica's multifarious strengths and talents. Whether you all know very well, who are from Jaipur at least, Whether Singh, she's the founder principal of the Maharaja Savai Bhavani Singh School in Jaipur, and she's been an educator for more than 20 years. Whatever she does, she excels at, and she's always constantly looking for kind of getting into a very holistic education scene for youngsters, especially. Um, our Right Circle episodes are always done in association with Prabha Khaitan Foundation. They're presented by Shri Cements and in association again with Ehsaas Women and Spagia Foundation. I'm going to hand over to Monica and Vedahi for the evening, and they'll walk you through a lot of thoughts that are insightful and incisive at the same time. Just one housekeeping rule, whoever's attending the session, please send your name and address to, and I'm saying the number, so please note it down, 94615440002 in the next 48 hours so that we can send the copy of Monica's book to you by courier. We will repeat this number at the end of the session, so it's all right if you missed it right now. Very warm welcome to Monica and Vedahi. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. I'm really sorry I'm off camera because my internet connection is not stable enough, but we are all looking forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Meeta. Am I audible?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Meeta, and welcome, Monica, to this session of the Right Circle.
Thank you.
My compliments to you for coming out with a wonderfully comprehensive book on a subject, money, finances, which impacts us on a daily basis. But many of us shy away from, talking about it, maybe feeling intimidated, or sometimes finding it boring, or sometimes just not wanting to apply our minds to it. So, what made you write it in such a conversational style, such a relatable, readable book, and sans all that financial and technical jargon?
Thank you, Vedi. And Meeta, thank you for the introduction. Delighted to be here. Yes, let's get right into it. Why did I write the book? Because I started my career as a business journalist, and a series of coincidences got me to being part of what became India's first personal finance magazine, which was then called Intelligent Investor and then became Outlook Money. Till then, business journalism was from the point of view of the company. So it was all about CEOs and their lifestyles. But if we all remember, 91 was when India opened its doors to liberalization.
Mhm.
And India's first personal finance magazine got launched in 98. It took that much time for modern financial products to start coming in. And I probably became one of the first few people in India, first few journalists to understand this genre called personal finance.
Mhm.
And as I understood it, I also realized how little I knew. So I got in, I trained, I learned, I passed exams, I did all of that. And the understanding grew that uh, financial products are invisible.
Mhm.
They are created in our minds when the person selling them describes it
Yes.
through brochures, through promises, through big stories about returns. And it is in the story that this person creates that we have a image of this product. It is not a car that you can sit in, the color that you can see, or a ice cream that you can eat.
Yeah. It's not tangible. It's not there for you to, yeah.
Yes. And the moment of truth of a financial product can be tomorrow or can be 40 years later, as is the case in a pension product.
Mhm.
So if I don't like a bag of chips, I don't buy that brand again. But if that pension product has been described wrongly to me, I will only find out after 40 years. If that medical insurance plan has been described wrongly to me, I will find out when I need it when I go to the hospital.
Very true.
So somewhere along the road, I realized
Hmm.
that the financial sector was not being truthful. And that's the softest way that I can say. I
Mhm.
can say that there are tricks and traps. I can say that there is deliberate mis-selling. I can say that there is deliberate fraud. I can say a lot of things. I can say that you're in a shark infested pool of water and you have to look after yourself. So somewhere I think people who become journalists have this kida in their dimag. They, you want to do something.
Yeah.
For me, it became sort of this mission of my life to say, look, we need these financial products, but the market is broken. There's deep flaws in the way regulations have evolved in many parts of the market.
Mhm.
There's regulatory arbitrage, which means that there are different regulators selling the same product, seeing the same product, but with very different rules of the game. So from whichever way that I looked, I thought that these are products which everybody should have because they solve definite problems.
Okay.
But the gap between me needing it and me buying them is so great that an average person freezes. And as I began to write and talk more and more, the feedback came that when you tell us these things, it makes sense, but there is no book to read.
Because you speak in the language of the people, which is very easily understandable.
Yes. And if
Yeah.
you don't, if you're using jargon, it means you don't know or you're deliberately trying to befuddle. There can only be two things. So if
Yeah.
you know something, you will tell it simply because you want to communicate.
Yeah.
So if you're using jargon, either you don't know it or you're
So you
deliberately
just
trying
want,
to.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that became the reason to say, look, I think this can be done. It is not that tough.
Mm.
And I, because of the profession, there is a certain amount of communication skills and writing skills I have. So it sort of becomes your duty to put this out to say, look, this is how it is. This is what you can do. This is what not to do. So it became just the next step in the work that I had done, Vaidehi.
Yeah, wonderful. I think you've explained it so well because when I read the book, I am not a finance person, as I had, Nisha, earlier when I was speaking to you. And my first thought was that I don't know whether I'd understand the book. But believe me, I couldn't put it down. I understood, I don't know whether I've understood it fully, but at least I didn't feel intimidated. I felt interested, in fact, that, okay, I must read it and I must understand. And yeah, so I think that's the success of your book.
Wonderful.
Uh, in fact, your book speaks to everyone, whether it's a person who's just started on a job, or it's a young couple with kids and dependent parents and extended family, or even a person who's near retirement. There's you're starting with a story, very relatable, something which has happened maybe in our own life, and we can easily connect to it.
Yes.
I would like you to, in the initial chapters, you mentioned that uh, how important it is to organize finances and how it can be done very well by putting your money in three boxes. And
Right.
labeling it, that's very important. So I would like you to talk about those three boxes.
Right. Where they see what happens is that the minute we start talking about investing money, the conversation straight goes to complicated products, to asset allocation, to portfolio building, to leverage. It immediately becomes very complicated. But to get to that complexity, you need to have the foundations in place. I've always found this gap between people asking us to make asset allocations and diversifications. But the first few steps of having a cash flow system in place are not there. And so that became my starting point, that just this simple hack of separating your spending money from your saving money. And the insight is that a lot of us have said, and I have said it myself, that I don't know where my money goes. Right? We end up saying that, yeah, I know it came, but I don't know where it went.
Happens
And
to most of
it
us.
does. Yes, it does. It doesn't matter what level of income you are, but
Yeah.
literally anything in the bank or anything cash that you get at home, it goes away. Somewhere it gets spent.
Mm.
So this putting a wall between your spending money and your saving money becomes a very important thing. And the way that I have found it useful to do, I'm sure that everyone will have their own ways of doing it, is that I've demarcated one bank account. So I've opened 3 bank accounts. One I label as an income account. So every rupee into my life drops into that account. So then there is no question of, I don't know how much I got this month, or this quarter, or at every
You know
moment. I
exactly
know.
how much income you're having.
Yes, how much am I getting? And this is true for people who may not be in a salary, but maybe on a consultancy or a business. You
Right.
get lump sums of money. So you know how much is there in your income account.
Right.
Budget making is very boring, and we start doing it very diligently 1st Jan, but by 1st Feb, it's all gone. But I think all of us know approximately how much we spend, give or take a few thousand here or there.
Mm-hmm.
So from your income account every month, top of the month, you transfer to a second bank account and you label it my spending account. Every rupee that you spend comes out of that account, whether it's a credit card bill or a debit card, or you're paying ATM withdrawals, everything, any outflow for spending is happening from your spend it account. That's bank 2.
That's your second box, right?
What is left in your income account, you push to a third account, which is your invested account.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is actually your savings. You're not investing yet. It's just sitting. We're just forming this habit of separating spending and saving. And here is where it begins to give you little more control over your life. So you've set up, it took me 6 months to set this simple system up, because lives, actual real lives are complicated. You have joint accounts with your spouse, sometimes with your family.
Yes.
You've got to figure a lot of things out. But once this thing is created, you have an oversight about inflows, outflows, and savings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether savings is a residue or a target is something now you can decide.
Yes.
So I'm constantly trying to give you control and oversight over your decisions.
And clarity about how
And
much.
clarity,
Yeah.
correct. So right now, all that we've done is we've built a system. In 6 months, you will figure out your spending rhythms. And then you can take a considered decision that every month I'm able to save this much money. We're not investing yet. We're just building this rhythm, this habit. Investing will happen much later. I come to investing.
Also, yeah, and you're also saying that this habit can be formed at any age. It's not necessary that you've just started out, and anyone can get into this labeling and putting your money in 3 different ways, accounts, and understanding your finances and having some clarity on it.
Correct. That's right. It's so the system that I have. One is that I am not telling you that you will get rich next year. I have no such magic formula. I am saying that this is a very long ride. I don't promise wealth instantly. Over a long period of time, you will build financial fitness and eventually you will build wealth. But it's not going to happen next year. And the second thing is that I don't have a magic formula to give. You will have to work equally hard. I can point you in a direction. How you will travel on that, whether it's by road, rail, air, or what car you will travel in, or those are your decisions, because every person is unique. And that is something I believe you will have to personalize the system.
Yes.
It's like it's an IKEA box you're getting. You build your own.
Yeah. So now, since we are talking about boxes, I want you to talk about this box which is labeled savings, and then your investment would come out of that. Now, traditionally in India, gold and real estate, they have always been perceived as safe and sound investments. Real estate, especially, it's a favored investment option. Holds the fascination of many people because maybe it's tangible. You can see it; it's right there. You
Right.
have stories from your grandparents and parents who made fabulous. You've got fabulous returns from it. It's tangible. It's also a limited resource, so people feel that it'll give good returns. You've debunked this, and you're saying that apart from a roof over your head, your investment should not be in real estate and in gold also. I'd like you to talk about that.
Okay, so let's look at different points of time in the journey of a country. What India was in the 70s is not what India was in the 1990s, and is certainly not what India is in the 2020s. So there is a life cycle of the country's economic progression. So what made sense in the 1960s and 70s, because there was no private financial sector as such, it was all government controlled. We were a socialist economy. What to produce, how to produce, for whom to, all these decisions were taken by the government.
Yes, yes.
So there weren't those many options to in modern financial products in the country. That was part one. Part two is that we've had informal sector as the large part of the economy, which means a lot of cash stealing. We've had a problem with people paying income tax. We've had a problem with all of that. A lot of that is getting sorted out with GST, with post demonetization, post the Benami Transactions Act. There is an overall tightening that this government at the center has done. So when you look at real estate as an asset, the prices have gone so high because it has been a sump for black money. So there has been these ratios of 40-60, 40% white, 60% black. These ratios have gone on changing, but we all have to accept that real estate has been a place where you could put your non-tax paid money into. And once you have done that, every time you sell, you again have cash and again, so you're in that cycle. So one of the things about real estate has been that it's been a sump for non-tax paid money. As the country, you cannot have a large informal sector where neither entrepreneurs nor people pay tax. When you become the 5th largest country in the world in terms of GDP, we're at all 3 trillion, we are going towards 5 trillion. In the next 20 years, we'll be the 3rd largest economy in the world. You cannot get there by doing cash, by doing with people not paying tax. So there is a certain progression in the life cycle of a economy in a country. So we have to see our place in that. What our grandparents did was perfectly rational in the 50s, 60s. It is not perfectly rational anymore.
Yeah. And do you see more people, looking at it like this?
Yes, yes. So all that I'm hearing from wealth managers who are now going to tier 2, tier 3 towns, and they're saying that there is this huge realization that the old rules are not working anymore. Cash, of course, is still there.
Yes.
But the cost of doing cash business has gone up. So what are the indications? What are the signals that the central government is giving that we will make it costly for you to deal with non-tax paid money?
Right.
And as that cost goes up, the desire to move out of sumps of black money, which is gold and real estate, goes up. So that transfer towards financial assets like stocks, through mutual funds, through PMS, through AIFs, alternative investments, all of that is happening as part of regulated market.
Yes, and
rather
equity
than the cash
mutual
stealing. So
funds have come up in a big way in the
correct,
past.
correct,
Yes,
correct.
yes,
So what I think what everybody needs to know is that in the formal financial sector, which is regulated by SEBI,
maybe, yes.
the regulatory view is that the mutual fund rules are the tightest because
Mhm.
it's meant for a person who starts with investing even 500 rupees. So they
Yeah.
have some of the tightest rules in the whole world. I
Mhm.
have been a part of the mutual fund committee for over a decade. And I have to tell you that some of the strictest rules, transparency, all of that is there in the Indian mutual fund industry. This
Yeah.
is for entry level investors. As the net worth grows, then the PMS, the portfolio management scheme, is next.
Yeah.
Yes, there are rules, but they are more relaxed. And then for the very high net worth is the alternate investment funds, AIF,
Mhm.
which have far less scrutiny, far less tighter regulation. So investors need to understand that mutual funds are great for entry level, first time investors, even seasoned investors find it
Mhm.
useful because of the strictness of the rules.
Yeah.
There is a certain logic to the market.
Yeah. Tell
And
me
you need to
something.
understand.
Yes,
Yeah.
since you're saying that it's much more safer, so to say, to invest in mutual funds and equity. Not all of us are very comfortable with the idea of following up the stock market every day, or even looking at our investment in mutual funds. So, do we have to go through an agent, or should we educate ourselves when we invest in mutual funds?
So mutual funds is the road that you take to investing in stocks, bonds, gold, and
Mhm.
combinations of this. Okay,
Mhm.
so it's not just stocks.
Yeah.
So you can buy stocks directly, or you can buy them through a mutual fund, but a mutual fund will also give you access to bonds. It will
Yes.
also give you access to gold
Mhm.
and combinations of these. Right. So that's the first thing that you need to know. You need to understand the product even before you hand over the decisions to a financial planner. So rather than an agent, my suggestion would be find a good financial planner
Mhm.
who takes a fee, like a lawyer does, like a doctor
Yes.
does,
Yes.
and then constructs a portfolio for you. So
Mhm.
it's not about saying that this mutual fund is doing well. It's about having a portfolio which has some large cap, mid cap, small cap. You'll have
Yeah.
a mix of mutual fund types so that your risk is diversified.
Mhm.
And for people who don't understand that, the simplest, least risk product in the market is something called an index fund,
Mhm.
where you don't have what is called a fund manager risk. So a fund manager is not choosing stocks in this. They're simply buying stocks which are in the Sensex or Nifty 50. These are the broad market indices.
Yeah.
Sensex has 30 companies in that index.
Mhm.
Nifty 50 has 50. Whatever is the result of today's up and down, you will get, your money will either grow that much or less.
Yeah.
Over a long term, between 7 to 10 years, in a growth economy like India, the average annual return on the Sensex has been about 14.5%. Average annual every year.
Mhm.
On a long-term basis, the money has grown 14.5%. There are years like last year to now where it's grown 100%. There have been years where it has fallen by 25%, 50%, so it evens out.
Yeah.
What you need to remember is that should you decide to invest in the stock market, an index fund is an entry level way to do it.
Mhm.
And then you need to be sure that you want to wait for 7 years before you look at your NAV or your price and say, oh, I have made or lost money.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a long term, just as you don't look at your real estate price every day.
Yes.
You have to give equity the same respect that you give real estate.
True.
It is not a gambling machine. It is not something which will turn you rich tomorrow or overnight. That you really need to remember.
Yeah. One needs to understand that the stocks, you may invest in stocks, but if you're looking for, if you're being greedy, if I may just use that term,
Yes,
then
yes.
you may not get the returns. In fact, you may get into a bit of
Yes.
yeah.
Markets go up and down.
Yeah.
I cannot say what will happen tomorrow or next year. I have no idea. But after 7 years, I'm reasonably sure that my average annual is about 14.5. It's like that.
Okay. Another field which is very confusing and which all of us go in for, we because of maybe insecurities is insurance. And
Correct.
you've written quite a lot about what kind of insurance is important and what is not. So tell us more about how to go about it, because there are n number of policies and private players, and there are agents who are um, luring the consumers with having these hybrid products that you have to give a premium and you'll also get a return. So it's very confusing for the layperson.
Right. So first thing to understand is that there is life insurance is separate,
Yes.
health insurance is separate. So we'll just deal with life insurance first.
Mhm.
Life insurance should not be bought to either save taxes or to get a return. Life insurance should be bought like the way you buy a car insurance, which means if the car has an accident or gets stolen, you get some money. Life insurance is if the principal breadwinner of the family has an untimely death,
Yes.
then that money goes to the family for the rest of their lives. Right? So very rich people who don't need to go to work to pay their bills don't need life insurance. Everybody does not need life insurance. Only people who have dependent family members
Mhm.
on whose income the family is living and is building their future.
Yeah.
We are trying to protect the untimely death of such a person, because with the death, that income will stop.
Yeah.
So we're trying to build a corpus, a very large amount of money, which is usually 10 times of the annual income.
Yes.
So if the annual income is 10 lakh, the amount of insurance cover is 1 crore. Okay,
Right.
so you're trying to build a very large corpus so that if this person has an untimely midway death, then the family gets this very large amount, which can be then invested to live off the return for the rest of their lives. That's the logic of life insurance. The only product which gives you for a very small premium, a very large cover, is pure term life cover. It's a pure term insurance policy. No bank will talk about it. No insurance agent will talk about it. But if you are in the market for a life insurance cover, you should ask for a pure term life cover. Go online, buy straight from the company. You will get a premium which is half of what the agent will give you, because the agent commission has been taken out.
All
Be
right.
truthful in your filling of the form, get a medical test done.
Mhm.
The usually mid 30s is a good time to buy that, because your premiums are low and you lock into that premium for the duration of the policy, which typically ends at age 60, because by 60 your retirement corpus is in place.
Yeah.
Then the need for that cover is not there. So please understand the purpose of life insurance. It is not to give you a return. They sell it to you as a return because they get a commission which is as high as 42% legally and 100% illegally, which means your entire first premium.
Legally also is very high.
Legally, so out of 1 lakh of your premium, 42,000 the agent is getting according to the rules, and underhand they get your entire first premium, which is why there is so much of push by the banks and by the agents to get you to just buy that first policy.
Yes.
Right.
And
So
sometimes your agent only tells you to change your policy or go in for a new one. Why does that happen?
Because so it's all money. It's finance is all about incentives. So you have bought a 15-year policy. Okay. The first year the agent has got, let's say 42% of your 1 lakh.
Right.
The second year also you're paying 1 lakh premium. What is his commission? 7.5%, 7,500. What is his commission for the rest of the duration of that policy? 7,500. What do you think he will do? After 5 years, 4 years, once you've got used to that 1 lakh, he'll say, nahi, acha nahi hai. Let me get you a new one. Why? Because he's going to get another 42,000 on that, or your entire first premium.
Whatever, yeah.
And that money that you have spent 5 lakh, you have washed off in your head. Something will come. So they are harvesting that first year commission. Every few years, they harvest that first year commission. And I don't know why people haven't figured out this game, because people sit with 5, 10, 15, 20 life insurance policies, which don't give you cover. And it's just money down the drain, because the return on these policies is 2-3% only. PPF is giving you 7% return.
Correct.
But the return, long-term return on these policies is between 2 to 3%.
Yeah.
So for everybody who's buying, it's a bad deal.
Mm.
So just stay away. No matter what the agent promises, he will give you a rebate, he will hand over half your premium to you. Just say no, you don't need this product.
Mm. And what about medical cover?
Medical cover is it's a very difficult product to buy because there is so many things that you need to look after. I would encourage you to read the chapter on medical insurance in my book, because I've tried to demystify all the fine print. This is not a cover that you buy with the lowest premium, right? Because medical insurance is about both cost and benefit. And in the benefit, you have to be sure that you will get the benefit what you think you should. Let me give you an example. You may have a 10 lakh rupee medical insurance policy, but you didn't see that there was a room cap of 2,000 rupees. What this means is that the insurance company will not pay room rent in the hospital, which is above 2,000 rupees. So your bill may be 5 lakh and you might think that your insurance policy will pay, but these are fine prints.
Yeah, and this is
The room,
one has heard about these stories,
so
how
when the room rent suppose is 5,000,
yeah.
the insurance company doesn't pay the difference. It will only pay up to 2,000. Now all the doctors' costs, everything is linked to this room rent. So this is just one. There are several things that you need to look after. And yes, the regulator needs to do this better. Our insurance regulator has failed in its duty to protect policyholders, and there's literally nothing that we can do. I can only advise you to be very careful when you buy these policies. You've got to look at least 6 or 7 things before you do it. And just remember, you should fill the form yourself. Do not lie on the form.
Yes.
Get a medical test done, because at the moment of truth, when you're in the hospital with a very large bill and the insurance company comes back and says, you had a pre-existing disease which you didn't disclose, we will not pay your bill.
Yeah.
So it's a contract. You are legally bound by the contract. You're legally bound not to lie on that contract.
Yeah.
So don't let the agent fill your form, fill it yourself. I cannot emphasize this enough. Okay, agent just wants to make his commission. He just wants you to sign.
Yeah.
But this product is solving a problem for you. So treat it with a lot of respect.
Yeah. So, all this talk that you're saying that you should do it yourself and you should read the fine print, I think we need to have that mindset and that attitude that, this is going to impact me really badly if I don't go through the fine print and I don't read it properly and understand it. Again, I'm asking you a different question now, which is, I think, maybe a deeper understanding of book, is that in India, again, it's a very male-dominated field where investments or talking about money or investments, even in a family where women are earning and contributing substantially to the family income, they willingly take a back seat. So when you talk about do your own research, do your own reading, we need to understand that very often a large part of our population, which is women, 50% maybe, is not even involved in any financial decisions. So how is it because we have this male-dominated society, or is it the hierarchy in the family, or is it because we've not been able to educate our girls properly? And should we? I know that financial literacy now is one of the subjects offered even at school level. What would bring a change in the mindset so that we don't get cheated like this?
So I think the women and money question is far deeper than just financial literacy. I think it's got a lot of embedded social contexts.
Yes.
So one context is that the assets, especially of business families, go down the male line. The daughters are brought up not to ask too many questions about money, because you don't want to hand the business over to a daughter who's going to go to somebody else's house. So we can dress this up in many ways in polite society. We can pretend that this does not happen, but this is the reality. There are always exceptions. But girls are encouraged not to ask too many questions about money in the father's house.
In spite of all the laws coming in for inheritance and
Correct. Laws can only take,
yeah,
they give you a superstructure for the women who understand it and want to fight.
yes,
But you don't want to fight with your own family. Really. I mean, that's what you have. So the girl, when at time of marriage, she's handed over jewelry, dowry. You can dress up the word dowry in many ways, but she's given a handout at that time. And a lot of NOCs are usually taken so that there is no interest in the
later.
business, or some directorship is given or something is sort of given.
Yeah.
And woe befall the woman who asks for asset in the marital home. Okay, so she's not going to be taken, her asking of her share is not going to be taken very kindly.
Yeah.
And most marriages take a lot of work, so this is one more thing that you don't want to put on the table, especially because of the reaction that it gets. So it's like bombs have gone off everywhere if a woman should dare to ask about her share of anything.
Right.
So then you try and make it all work and just stay away from things which will erupt a family. So
Okay,
that's
so
one part of it.
sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to ask you a personal question now. How did you get into it? You know, what interested you
I
in?
have this strange thing that both my husband and I are professionals,
Yes.
and he's taken the very easy way of out, saying that you handle it. So actually it's completely reversed in my case. So I am the one who would file taxes.
All right.
And when the roles are reversed, when a woman does it, see, the difference that I notice is that when a man does it, it's all about him having control and doing everything, and they don't even leave a paper trail. When I am managing for the family, my concern is if I were to die suddenly, they will not even know where the assets are. So you make notes, you tell them passwords are here, look, this is how I do it.
Right.
You make that extra effort to onboard everyone, to tell them where the assets are, who it belongs to, where the locker keys are. So that's a duty of care. It's my fiduciary.
Yeah.
In our case, it's completely reversed. I can, so whoever holds this money power has a lot of responsibility. And I wish
Of course.
the men would understand how important it is for them, the person who knows more. It's your responsibility
Yes.
to onboard the person who is vulnerable. So you can use this as a power play, or you can use it as a fiduciary to onboard the people who don't know. So yes, in my case, it's completely the reverse. He's had an easy way that you figure it out, you do the taxes, you do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And talking of responsibility, I'm going to now take up a topic which you've again mentioned briefly in your book, is that of making a will.
Yes.
Uh, why do people defer it till sometimes very late?
So
And
very,
we've seen,
yeah,
seen
that's the
families and
exactly.
they're
And
a mess because there's no will. And what would you say? What should be the correct age for writing your will, and the nitty-gritties of making a will, which stands the legal
yes.
ground, and yeah.
So Mahabharat has this one scene where all the brothers are dead because they couldn't answer the Yaksh's question.
Yeah.
Then Yudhishthir goes and he's answering all the question, and Yaksh asks him that what is the greatest surprise in the world?
Right.
And Yudhishthir says, the fact that we all know that we're going to die, but we behave as if we won't.
Don't we all do that?
Yes. So it is
We live forever. Yes.
this thing of not wanting to accept our mortality. And within families, there is these emotional minefields are there, that should you dare to ask parents or in-laws about their will, that emotional bomb comes back at you. You want us to die.
Yes.
No, I don't want you to
It's
die.
a very sensitive topic.
Yeah,
Yes.
but I just wish we would discuss death in a little more dispassionate way, because a peanut down the wrong pipe can kill you.
Yes.
So we are the most fragile and the most resilient in terms of our survival or death.
And especially now after COVID, we should all realize it.
So just try and have these conversations first within ourselves to become comfortable with, look, anybody can die.
Correct. Yeah.
No one comes with a 100-year visa on this earth. So one is to come to terms with the fact that we all die. Anybody can die. And then try and make people understand that the process of making a will is actually you are putting down in black and white all the assets, their location in one place. After death, it's like a paper chase. How many bank accounts were there? What assets did he or she have?
Yeah.
I mean, if you love your family and you say that you're caring for them now, care for them after you're gone. Extend your care to the time that you're not here. That's true love.
My God, you put it so well, so
No, but
beautifully. You
I
put
mean,
it.
I'm so surprised that it is
Yeah.
something so obvious to me
Yeah.
that you claim that you love your children and you're not going to make a will.
Yeah.
So the problem whether is something else. The problem is
Yeah.
that again, every family has a lot of issues.
Yes. Uh,
Making a will brings home all of those issues about division of assets. So the thing that I want to
who
tell
gets
you is
what? Yeah.
that you can make a will which is secret. Nobody needs to know. The witness to the will, you need two witnesses, need not read your will. They don't need, they are
Really?
only witnessing the
Okay.
signature, you signing the will on this date and time.
All
They
right.
don't need to read anything else. You can seal it, you can give it to a family lawyer, a family financial planner, a trusted member of the extended family, whoever you think will do the right thing after you're gone.
Mm.
You can make multiple copies, keep it in a bank locker. You can, the keys will be with whoever is next to you after you are gone. So you can do the due diligence in terms of distribution of your assets in the way that you want without the people.
Yeah.
uh,
I think that is one of the fears, that people don't want their children and their relatives and the
yeah,
extended
they
family
don't
to
want,
know.
yeah, because equal may not be fair.
Yes.
So
Yes.
because there is always one family, one child who's going to be looking after you more than the others.
Yeah.
So then there are a whole lot of these issues
Yeah,
within families. We all pretend that they're not there, but
the family dynamics really come into.
so we should talk about it. Yeah, it's ghar ki kahani. It's fine. That's how it is.
Yeah. So, Monica, I think I need to open it up to the audience,
Okay.
but I have to ask you one question.
Tell
And
me.
that is there's this whole talk about a lot of people showing interest in investing in cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
So, what are these? One hears of this Bitcoin, which is quite old, and then there's this Dogecoin, I think, and others. So, what's your take on it? How safe are these investments, and what's the legal position in India?
My suggestion to you is if you don't understand stocks, shares, and financial sector, just stay away from cryptocurrency. These are digital tokens. Okay.
Yes.
They are digital tokens which have got value because there is a lot of demand. Some experts are calling it a limited supply of nothing. Okay.
Okay.
What is an asset? So work it out for yourself. What is an asset? Why is gold an asset?
Yeah.
Because it has an underlying value. It is used in jewelry. It is used in industry. It is the oldest metal which from times immemorial has held value. So
Yeah.
gold is physical. It's a store of value.
Yeah.
Why does a stock have value? Because it's a company which is listed on a stock market.
Yeah.
There are profits and losses, which gives it value.
Correct.
Why does a bond have value? Because there's a regular interest stream coming and your principal comes back. What is a cryptocurrency? It's a digital coin. It's a digital token. There is no underlying to this. There is no underlying asset which is of value.
Why are people so fascinated, like especially abroad?
Because, so every few years, there is a new fad. Okay, there was tulip mania in Netherlands in the, I think, 19th century. A bulb of tulip was selling for, I don't know
Yes.
how much money.
Yeah.
Then there was this emu eggs story.
Yes.
Okay, then there were plantations.
Yeah.
Right now, remember that there's a whole lot of liquid money sloshing around in the global economy. And banking rules have gone on being tightened, and so have real estate rules. it has to find a release somewhere. It's coming to the cryptocurrencies. Yes, somebody will become supernormal rich, but is that going to be you? I'm not that sure. So, I mean, yes, if you understand these things and if you have already a diversified portfolio, you understand things like geographical diversification, NAV, PE ratios, duration, you understand parts of finance.
Yeah.
Then you're taking a structured risk to diversify with a small amount of crypto is a very different conversation than somebody saying, I'm going to get rich on crypto. I'm in bank deposit. I'm going to break my dad's deposit and buy. Don't do that. Just don't do that. Do not invest in anything that you
The
don't
legal
understand.
position in India. It's not legal, is it?
So the government is not happy about crypto because of these things, because see, when the crypto bubble bursts, everyone will blame the government. Okay, it's
Right.
going to happen. The crypto bubble will burst. People will say, oh, government, you're to blame. But today, the courts have said that you cannot ban this. So the judicial system has its own whatever way of looking at the world. So they have said you can't ban it.
All right.
So what the government and RBI does is makes it very difficult to
Mhm.
actually transact. So
Okay.
the payout. So
Mhm.
what is an investment? You pay in and there's a payout. So when you buy in a bank deposit, you go to the bank, you put money in, you get money out.
Correct.
The payout is very important. So there are crypto exchanges. The payout is not that easy.
All right. Okay.
So no, it is not banned. China has gone ahead and banned it.
Mhm.
We have not banned it because we are a democracy. We are not a dictatorship like China.
Yeah.
So we have courts and they have ruled that you can't ban it. So we've not, but the government has made it difficult. So my only suggestion is don't get into something if you don't understand it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think we've had our 45, 50 minutes, in fact, almost, and we need to open it up to the audience for questions. Before we open it up, one more last, what are the financial lessons that we've learned, we should have learned from COVID? Just in very brief.
You need an emergency fund. You need between 6 months to 2 years of eating money in a very safe place. There is no shame in being in a fixed deposit to keep your money safe, because these extreme earth events are only going to increase. They're not going to go away.
Yes.
Okay, so whether it's COVID or whether it's floods or whatever. So those events are not going away, they're escalating. That's what we are seeing.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea to have money available to you for an emergency. 6 months to 2 years of your monthly expenses. Fixed deposit, if you understand debt funds, then funds which are low risk on both duration and credit risk. If you don't understand these words, stay with fixed deposits. Okay, so that's the most important lesson. The second one is have a file, and I call it, again, it's not a very polite term, but it is, if I die before you file. Think about the name, if I die before you file, which means you're putting down all the things which are relevant to your loved ones in a file, whether it's a physical file. Those are decisions which are yours.
Yeah.
But imagine that you are not there tomorrow. What does your family need to know? So COVID has brought home a lot of things to a lot of families, and this is one of them, that there is life even after you've gone. People will continue to live.
Yeah, life goes on, yes.
Life does go on, and you need to make it easier for them.
Thank you very much, Monica. I could go on, and I think some of my questions have been very, very basic for a person like you.
No, I actually know, but that's not true. Look, we need to ask basic questions. Only if the basics are answered can we progress. So I'm just very happy to go on answering the basic questions, because that's where we build a firm foundation. So no question is too basic for me.
So thank you so much. And we open it up now. Meenal, I think we could invite the audience.
Yes, thank you, Monica ma'am, for such an insightful session. The first question is, in case both the partners are working and their incomes what do you believe? Should the incomes be kept separate, or their spending and saving, and how should the spending and saving be managed?
Yeah, Meenal, good question. And I think for women and men of my generation, the answers were very simple. It was just one account, right? But as you become taxpayers, and as also for the millennials and Gen Z now, I think the stories are very different. So my suggestion to you all who are now starting out is this, that keep your money separate. Okay, his money, her money, her money, whatever combinations you guys have, your income and your investments are your own. Have a joint account for your spending. You understand? Your joint account, your spended account is joint. And whether you are sharing expenses equally or pro rata to income is something you people have to figure out. So understand this carefully. Are you going to be spending equal amounts? Or are you going to be spending pro rata according to your income? Figure it out. Have that conversation. These are very difficult things because two people from different families are coming together with different value systems around money. Most marriages break up because your value systems are different. Figure out your value systems around money, and then figure out who will spend, how that money is going to be spent. You make your investment, he, she makes their investments. Put the name as a joint or a nominee. Okay. So to that extent, you can either do a joint asset if the other person is contributing, or make them the nominee. Nominees can be changed should that relationship not work out. All right. So be careful with your money, especially to the women out there, because women still run the households. A lot of times the women end up spending their money, their salary on household expenses, and the men build the assets. Indian law doesn't acknowledge community of marital property. What this means is asset belongs to he or she who pays for it. In the situation of a divorce, the asset will belong to he who paid for it. Be careful. Assets have to be joint. Do not spend only on the household. Make it a joint spending. So this is not to say that marriages will break up, but this is another way of looking at insurance.
Yeah, thank you so much. Another question that we have is, as a 20-something person, do I need to be investing in stocks, or can I play it safe and play it safe with some mutual funds?
So the answer to this question is, one is that mutual funds is a road, it's not a destination. The mutual fund will take you to stocks, bonds, gold, and combinations of this. Okay, that's one. The second thing is that, do you ever ask that, should I eat only dal today? Should I eat only rice today? You don't. No, it's a mix of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, minerals, different attributes. So Indian thali is a wonderful concept. Your portfolio is the same. You're always invested into equity, bonds, little bit of gold, and combinations of these will vary according to your age and stage. So a 17-year-old boy and girl will have a different diet than a 70-year-old man and woman, isn't it? You will eat differently. You will eat the same roti, rice, dal, whatever meat, but your combinations, the proportions will change. At 20, you need to be far more into equity than debt because your earning runway is very long. The risk-taking ability that you have is long. The compounding that will happen for you is long. So by putting yourself into debt, into safe assets, bonds, you're giving up on the growth that the stock market can give you, right? So don't do an either or. It's an and. It's always an and. At 70, you're still invested in the stock market. The rule of thumb is 100 minus your age. So at 20, you're 80% into equity, right? So don't hold on to these ratios as hard ratios. It's a direction that at age 20, you can take far more risk because your recovery time is more, and you can, there are many business cycles ahead of you for their money to recover, which is why you can be more into equity. But that's only a starter conversation. You can't go out, buy 5 stocks and say, I'm into equity. If you
Yeah.
don't understand equity, you have to start with index funds. Okay.
Yes. Yes. We have one more question. I won't want to. Don't want to waste your time. But the last one is, are wills questioned by law or others? Like, there's a lot of confusion around how wills work, because in India it's not properly introduced. The
Right.
concept is not properly introduced. So, are wills questioned by law or others?
No, so the will, so the sad part is that every financial sector regulator has its own rules. Banks are not even willing to look at wills. They look at only nominations. So wills are there really to collect everything in one place and ensure that your nominations are in place. So please put your nominations for bank accounts. The fixed deposits will have its separate nomination. It's completely cuckoo rules, but that's how it is. So ensure that your nominations, you have filled the nomination, because banks are say that we don't look at the will. You've now got to get a legal heir certificate, for which there is a whole lot of bribing which happens at the lower court level. So get your nominations in place. The will becomes a document where all your assets are listed, and you can go to the bank and say, look, the will is giving it to this person who's also the nominee. So it gives a second sort of justification to moving the money. But by itself, there are situations where the will is not going to be counted. So yes, we ask people to make wills, but that's not a sufficient condition. The necessary condition is to put your nominations in. Okay.
Yes. I'm so sorry, but we have one more last question.
Let's do this.
What's the best way to save? So,
Best way to save is to separate your spending from your saving. That's it. Just separate it out. See, everyone who has used this system has come back to me in 6 months and said, I did not know I could save this much. Because that money starts to accumulate. We don't even begin starting to invest it before 6 months are gone and you figured out your saving rhythm. That's your best way to save. If you're not saving even a rupee, if there's no infusion into the invested account, there is something that you're doing wrong. You can only increase your income or reduce your spending. There is no third way. If you are rotating your credit card debt, you're in deep trouble. If you've seen Squid Game, you should worry. So those of you who watched Squid Game, you know what I'm talking about. Get out of debt, get out of credit card debt. There are good loans and bad loans. Good loans build assets or contribute to your earning capacity, like an education loan or a laptop, which helps you at work. Taking a loan for a gadget, a new phone, or a holiday is going to get you into debt. Do not rotate, do not take loans online. Don't go to those P2P apps to invest. Be very careful. Do not get into debt. That's all that I can tell you, people.
Thank you so much, Monica ji. Thank you, Vaidehi ji. This was a wonderful conversation. I think we're all done with the questions. And I think I'll say for everyone who's joined us today that we've all learned so much over the past hour. I think we're all going to go back, relook at everything, sort of reconsider.
And read the book.
And absolutely, 100%, 100%. So thank you so much. Thank you, Monica ji. Thank you, Vaidehi ji. With that, before ending the session, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, Prabha Khaitan Foundation, Shree Cement, Ehsaas Women, and the Spagia Foundation. As I think Meenal has already told all of you, please send us your name and address on 94615 44002 in the next 48 hours, and we'll send you a copy of Monica G's book so you can keep reading and keep making smarter choices with your money.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will be back with another Right Circle soon.
It's been
Thank you.
an
Thanks.
absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.